No, what's going on, guys? It's Horse Beef here. I'm going to talk about Lucas Tracy's fucking GOAT list that has definitely stirred up some controversy in the MMA YouTube community. So I wanted to take a little look at it and see what's going on here, because in case you guys weren't aware, I did actually upload my own top 20 GOAT list, I think around 7 months ago. I believe around 7 months ago. And I had one similar take, and it was also based on if robberies were reversed, right? So considering robberies, clear robberies to be wins for these specific fighters, I actually ranked Petr Yan at number 10, right? And everyone who says I'm a hater of Islam Makhachev, like Lucas Tracy ranked him as the GOAT, that's pretty crazy in my opinion. But I ranked Islam Makhachev as number 6, greatest fighter of all time. So if you want to say that I'm a hater of Islam Makhachev, then take it up with someone else, because I ranked him number 6, which I think is pretty fucking generous. But Lucas Tracy went even further than I did with the Petr Yan glaze and ranked him at number 8, which I think is pretty crazy. But I would like to go through it, right? 26 through 30, we have Justin Gaethje there. I think it's pretty ridiculous to put Justin Gaethje above a lot of the guys who he ends up putting at 31 through 50, like guys like Dan Henderson, Shogun, who, in my opinion, these dudes are way ahead of Justin Gaethje in the all-time rankings. I understand Justin Gaethje has less losses, but I think that's a weird metric to go based off of, because a lot of these guys fought well into their 40s, right? Dan Henderson, for example, I think he fought Michael Bisping for the second time when he was 46, and arguably deserved to win that fight anyway, which is pretty fucking nuts, right? It's pretty nuts. But it's not the most egregious thing in the world, and I know what Lucas Tracy is going for here, right? He's trying to usher in this new era where we can finally admit that new age fighters have surpassed the older guys, because it's hard for the old heads to admit that sometimes, and I do agree with that, right? And I do like what Lucas Tracy is doing. I do, right? Because he has a very clear criteria, and he's trying to apply it in the best way that he can. But you get into situations where you start to rank guys like Arman Tsarukyan as the number 18 greatest fighter of all time. Now that's where I think a lot of people have issues. That is one of the craziest MMA takes of all time, and to my knowledge, he's actually defended this placement since, and he does admit, I believe, that he may have ranked him a little bit higher than he probably deserves. I would argue that he has Arman Tsarukyan ranked way too high just by him being on this list in general, right? Because for me, greatness is yes, of course, big wins are great, but true greatness has to be defined by accolades. There's no other way to quantify how great somebody is, right? There's a reason why everyone from 10 all the way up to the GOAT were champions, right? But then you have guys like Arman Tsarukyan above all-time greats like Dominic Cruz, even Charles Oliveira, even Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has a much stronger resume than Arman Tsarukyan, but having him above Israel Adesanya, I mean, I'm a huge Israel Adesanya hater, some people could say, but ranking Israel Adesanya below Arman Tsarukyan because Arman Tsarukyan has wins over who? Charles Oliveira? Okay, that's a good win, right? It was a close fight, but it was a good win. Some people would say it was a robbery. I disagree. I don't think it was a robbery. I mean, I know he considers that Mateusz Gamrot fight to be a robbery, which I do as well. And he has a win over Joel Alvarez, Demir's Magulov, which somehow Lucas Tracy weighs up pretty heavily, even though Demir's best win is probably Joel Alvarez as well. Which is a good win, of course. Of course, we can choose this guy, that name. That's a good win. That's a good win. That's a good win. But what exactly has Arman Tsarukyan done to deserve being even above Fedor? Fucking Fedor? Fedor Emelianenko is number 19 compared to Arman Tsarukyan, who's never touched a belt and who has about 4 pretty good wins on the record. A couple of very, very, very impressive wins. But that's enough? That's enough in this day and age to surpass the greats? Is just to get a couple of good wins? He hasn't even fought for a belt. I don't know. I think when it comes to greatness, you need to weigh up title defenses at some point. Maybe not to the same degree as you would back then, because he put Pantoja above Demetrius Johnson, and I actually agree with that. I very much agree with that. I think that Pantoja has surpassed Demetrius Johnson because he's putting up title defenses in a very, very stacked era of flyweight contenders. There are some really dangerous fighters, and Demetrius Johnson, you can say what you want, right? He defended the title 11 times, but at the same time, some of those dudes like Ian McCall and them, they just weren't on his level. But I think that just speaks to how good Demetrius Johnson is, and I think conceivably, Demetrius Johnson, if he was in his prime against these day contenders, I still think he would do very well against him. He was just ahead of his time type of fighter. similar to GSP. And speaking of GSP, number 6. Number 6 GSP below Volk, Jones, Topuria, and Merab, right? The Topuria placement for me, like, you guys know I'm a huge Topuria fan, but that is absolute recency bias. Like, saying he's pound for pound number 1 is very valid. He is pound for pound number 1. He should be pound for pound number 1. But ranking him in the top 5 MMA fighters of all time because of 3 wins is way too far, in my opinion. Way too far, because that discounts the long careers that some of these fighters put up. Like DC, for example. Dude, DC, double champion, right? Double champion. Big resume. I know some people like to discount the Anthony Johnson wins because he fought like an idiot, right? But you can't discount a win because of someone's game plan. You cannot say it's not a good win because the guy didn't fight the way I think he should have fought. Doesn't make sense, right? And he has 2 wins over that dangerous man. He was knocking out everybody, by the way, right? And if you want to weigh up resume of this fighter, who this fighter beat, Anthony Johnson knocked out Glover Teixeira and Alexander Gustafsson, I think, like, back to back. It's pretty fucking nuts, dude. And Daniel Cormier beat that guy twice in his prime when he was the boogeyman. Okay, I don't mind the Khabib placement. You know, I don't mind the Usman placement. Actually, I think the Usman placement is perfectly fair. He ranked him below GSP all time, which is just the way it is, right? Usman is objectively below GSP. Anyone who argues that Usman is above GSP is insane, even as far as welterweights, right? Erase the Michael Bisping win in the second belt, and he's still far greater than Usman all time. 4 of Usman's title defenses were against Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, right? So I don't want to hear it, right? And like, a lot of people consider Kamaru Usman's, like, one of his best wins to be Joaquin Buckley. So, like, how good is his resume really? The Pantoja placement I think is good. The Petr Yan at number 8, I think is relatively nuts, even though I ranked him at number 10, so I can't talk too much shit about that, and I'm a huge Petr Yan fan, so I get it. If you consider both Aljo losses to be robberies, of course the first one, you can't say it's a robbery because it was down to Petr Yan's fault. If you think the second fight is a robbery, which, I mean, as the biggest Petr Yan fan, I have to disagree. I don't think it's a robbery, but the Sean O'Malley loss, absolutely. But I guess you really have to consider that second Aljo fight a robbery to rank Petr Yan that highly. But he does have a great resume, a varied resume as well, right? Because he would have had a win over Aljamain Sterling, Jose Aldo. Who else does he have on the resume? And, like, honestly speaking, like Figueiredo, I guess, yeah, that's a good one too. So I guess technically he would have wins over multiple people on this GOAT list right now. So that is good for his claim. But I think number 8 is pretty crazy, and maybe Lucas Tracy's fandom for Petr Yan is shining through, which I have no problem with whatsoever. I would also argue that Max Holloway is a little bit too high on the list for me. Just a bit too high. We get through 11 to 15. I think Demetrius Johnson is even too low. I believe he should actually be above Khabib. He should definitely be above Max Holloway. Should be above Petr Yan as well. Just all those title defenses. At some point that has to come into play. It has to, right? I just spoke on DC. Alex Pereira, I would say, is just a bit too high for me as well. Right after that Magomed Ankalaev loss, like, in this case, dude, and in this case, if you're gonna have Justin Gaethje on this list, keep in mind that Yuri Prochazka doesn't even make an appearance on this list, but Arman Tsarukyan is ranked as high as number 18. Yuri Prochazka, in the last how many years now, has only lost to one man. He's only lost to Alex Pereira twice, and he's pretty much knocked out everybody else at the top of the heap. Of course, he has not beaten Ankalaev yet, and I believe if he is to beat Ankalaev, then he would 100% be on this type of a list for Lucas Tracy. But that has to come into play, right? Yuri Prochazka, he was a pretty dominant champion in Ryzen, I believe, comes to the UFC, knocks out everybody, becomes a champion, and only loses to one man, Alex Pereira, who is a top 15 fighter in Lucas Tracy's opinion. Jose Aldo, I think, is pretty subjective. He's a weird one because his longevity, right? It depends on how much you weigh up his longevity. You could argue that he deserves to be like a top 5, or you can argue that he deserves to be where he is. I'm sure you can even argue that he deserves to be lower than that. But for me, Jose Aldo's longevity should keep him up there, and I would even put him. I would personally put him in the top 10s there somewhere, but it's not too egregious. Anderson Silva, I understand why people discount his legacy as a whole. I do get that, right? He does have a ton of losses, even if those losses did come later on his career. And if you look at his resume, it's not the most spectacular thing, you know, filled with the greatest names. Like, rest in peace, Stephan Bonner. But then again, like, title defense against Stephan Bonner and 2 against Chael Sonnen, it's not the most impressive thing in the world. Like, these weren't the highest level fighters. They were very one-dimensional. And I'm not overly impressed by those. So I understand the Anderson Silva placement. It makes sense. Over time, he's one of the classic, like, top 5 GOATs, like the solidified top 5 GOATs who has fallen off. And I think a lot of people have come to that conclusion by now. But when he was reigning, the guy was making it look easy against guys that he should have been making it look easy against. And it'll be hard to see anybody replicating that run for Anderson Silva. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one for sure. Dricus du Plessis, I think he makes the case there, right? Technically, he's kind of like he's coming up on Anderson Silva's all-time like 185 GOAT status, I guess, right? Considering the placement here. And I said that after he beat Izzy, I said that he's on his way to surpassing Anderson Silva with a couple more title defenses. He's there 100%. I think Stipe makes sense there. Like I said, I already spoke on Arman. That's crazy placement. Like I said, one of the most insane MMA takes I've ever seen. There's just no argument that Arman should be there. If Arman's there, then Yuri should be there too. If anything, Yuri should be way higher than him. Arman maybe has a case for like 40 to 50 range, maybe, if you want to apply Lucas Tracy's logic. But I think this, like in this case with this logic from Lucas Tracy, it's just a bit of an overcorrection, right? He's trying to, like I said, usher in this new era where we're able to speak about newer fighters as the new GOATs, right? But like I said, overcorrection when it comes to putting Arman Sarukian there. He just hasn't done anything to deserve any sort of GOAT conversation, let alone number 18. That's just insane. With Fedor Emelianenko being so low, I think it's just an example of how people like Fedor should, for me, be at least 8 to 10. At least, or sorry, 6 to 10, my bad. At least 6 to 10, because I think a lot of people are discounting that long win streak that he was on, right? That like close to a decade long of no losses, fighting during the tournament era, right? The tournament era is something that should not be discounted. That was a tough time to be a fighter. The shit was the Wild West back then. And even though the level was lower back then, the tournament era is still way different than the era we have right now, where fighters are fighting like maybe like once or twice a year, right? The tournament era was different, and it's the reason why fighters picked up losses back then, right? Like all-time greats picked up more losses because they were fighting under not perfect circumstances. So the fact that Fedor was able to be long reigning during that era, I think speaks volumes to how great he actually was. Dominic Cruz, I think, like I said, man, Dominic Cruz, he was previously the 135 GOAT, and Arman Sarukian is ahead of him. That's crazy to me. Fuck. Charles Oliveira, okay, I can see him being there. Dustin Poirier, I can absolutely see him being there. I'm a huge Dustin Poirier fan, so you'll see no arguments here, and he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, to not be undisputed. And if you consider him to be a champion because of the interim belt, then that strengthens his claim even more. Israel Adesanya, as much as I'm a hater of his, I think he's a little bit underrated here. Like I said, below Arman Sarukian, speaks for itself, but Stipe Miocic, I think, should still be ahead of Israel. But I think it's a little bit underrating of Israel Adesanya, in my opinion. But Robert Whittaker right there as well. Okay, I would argue that maybe Moreno and Figueiredo and Aljo should be ahead of him probably. I would argue that maybe even Frankie Edgar too, because I know this maybe isn't part of his criteria, but the fact is that Frankie Edgar was fighting bigger men his entire career and moved down to 135 by the end of his career, right? He could make that weight at that age. When he was in his prime, he was fighting at 155 and was a champion in that weight class. Shit's crazy, and had multiple title defenses against bigger men, like I said. I don't know. I think Frankie should be from 16 to 25, especially if you're putting Arman Sarukian there. What the fuck? Bilal Muhammad, he does have a pretty good resume. He does, and he did win a belt. Okay, I would argue that maybe Moreno and Figgy should be ahead of him too, but then again, it's kind of, I don't know. It's very subjective. I think as you get lower on this list, I could see why you would place this guy there, this guy there. I would also argue that maybe Aljo is potentially a bit too low, but when I look at everyone above him, it kind of makes sense, other than, of course, Arman Sarukian. And Justin Gaethje being at number 30, I would say is way too high. Like, of course, he is one of the best to not win a belt for sure. But he should even be ahead of Arman Sarukian. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about Arman Sarukian here. But let's also go through his 31 through 50. And here's how you rank them. And I actually don't have an issue with the top 31 through 50. There are a few fighters that come to mind right away, like Henry Cejudo. Where is Henry Cejudo? I get that you can take a lot away from his resume or whatever, but like Sean Strickland is there. Okay. I mean, Lucas did also state that ratio of wins to losses plays a huge part. BJ Penn is there, right? Even though he does have some all-time wins, of course, so that propels him for sure. But BJ Penn has almost an even record, right? Vitor Belfort. Okay, right? Okay, Mirko Cro Cop maybe should be in the top 50 at that point, right? If you're putting guys like Vitor Belfort there, JDS I like, even putting Tony Ferguson there. You look at his resume, like yes, his run was great, but his resume doesn't hold up that well, even in his prime, even when he was El Kukui. Corey Sandhagen, is pretty nuts too. Like, surely you put Conor McGregor over Corey Sandhagen. Surely you put Dan Henderson. For me, that's the most egregious placement on this whole list. Dan fucking Henderson is so underrated that it's actually ridiculous. This man was fighting in his mid-40s. He fought for a belt at like 46 and almost beat Bisping, like I said. He's the only two weight class world champion in Pride's history. The only one, the first and the only one, right? And he does have a pretty good resume to go along with it. In fact, he has a win over Prime Fedor. For me, Dan Henderson is one of those fighters that you honestly have to put above the top 25. I think within the top 25, Dan Henderson has to be there. He is truly an all-time great, and he's very underrated. I even think that putting guys like Yoel Romero above him is pretty crazy, right? Leon Edwards being above Tyron Woodley to me is a little bit nuts too. I think it's a bit nuts. Fabricio Verdum, I like. He's an underrated heavyweight legend. Francis Ngannou, very underrated on this list too. Like, the fact that Yoel Romero is above him. I like the placement of Shogun. I do like that. He's showing some respect to Shogun. I would argue that he should be in the 26 to 30 range because of his run in Pride. Like, we're talking about Arman Tsarukyan being number 18 because he has a few good wins. Shogun Hua's 2005 run matches that, right? It matches that. You want to talk about a few good wins to be number 18 in the world, never fighting for a belt. How about Shogun Hua having a legendary 2005 run capped off by knockouts over Alistair Overeem and Ricardo Arona on the same fucking night, right? That's legendary shit that needs to be taken into account, not just losses that he picked up along the way or later on in his career. Because like I said, these guys were fighting very often. And compare that to now when guys are fighting maybe once or twice a year if we're lucky to see them there. I think that's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous, man. Sean Strickland, okay. TJ Dillashaw should probably be ahead of Strickland. Like, if you're going to have Strickland on this list at all, it's just nuts. Maybe he forgot about Henry Cejudo, though, so I'll give him credit there. Maybe he forgot. But that is the major admission here. Even, like I said, Mirko Cro Cop as well. If you're going to put guys like Strickland on this list, or even Chris Weidman, you have to put somebody like Mirko Cro Cop, even like a Vanderlei Silva, right? Rampage Jackson, maybe not Rampage Jackson, but Vanderlei Silva at some point should be on this list because come on, man. Come on. It's just nuts, man. Like, I'm looking at this list, I'm seeing fucking Sean Strickland and Weidman and no Henry Cejudo. It's something. It's definitely something. But like I said, these types of lists, man, these are really hard to keep track of. It's very easy to lose count or lose track of certain fighters here and there, especially ones like Henry Cejudo, right? Down to his stature alone, it's very easy to miss him. So I don't blame Lucas Tracy for leaving him out here. I'm sure it was just an admission that he forgot about. I've made the same mistake many times during my tier list, right? I've made that mistake. But when we get into Islam Makhachev being the GOAT of the sport, I think that's pretty crazy to say. That's pretty crazy. His last title defense was against Moicano. Before that, against Dustin Poirier, coming off one win against BSD, and then before that, a knockout loss. Right, Dustin Poirier, yes, he's an all-time great, but he didn't earn the title shot. He shouldn't have been in there. The one before that was the off-the-couch Volk head kick. Before that, of course, a great fight against Volk, which I thought Islam won justifiably. Right, but even his pre-title wins, like Bobby Green, to get the title shot in the first place, yes, he did beat like prime Charles Oliveira on that nasty run, so you cannot discount that win whatsoever, and he subbed them, right? But like, come on, we're talking about maybe, and of course early Arman Tsarukyan when he's new to the UFC, but we're talking about two wins of note, like Volkanovski and Charles Oliveira. Those wins in and of themselves are all-time wins. Those are fantastic wins. But GOAT status above GSP, and if you're going to have John Jones on the list at all, right? If you're even considering John Jones on this list, then you have to put him at number one. If not GSP, it has to be John Jones. If you're even going to include him whatsoever, putting him at number 3 is kind of disrespectful to his resume when you compare it to Islam Makhachev. Like, John Jones literally went through like 3 generations of fighters. Like, objectively speaking, he did. He went through 3 generations of fighters and beat all of them. Yeah, he looked unimpressive in some fights, and there were some fights that could have gone against him or whatever. But even then, even if you consider some of those fights to be robberies, like if you consider the Dominic Reyes fight to be a robbery, the first Gus fight, which it's tough to call that a robbery. I think it was just a very closely contested battle. And a great fight, by the way, too. But then he ended up finishing Gustafsson relatively easily in the rematch, right? And that wasn't washed Gustafsson either. But that's my point. Is like, if I'm making a GOAT list now, I'm just not including John Jones at this point. But keep in mind, that I also ranked John Jones as number 3 on my top 20 GOAT list, which is pretty nuts. Like there are some similarities here. So there is a similar way of thinking, but I've come to the conclusion that if you're going to rank John Jones on this list at all, he has to be number 1 or 2. Most definitely not below someone like Islam Makhachev, right? Maybe you can argue that Demetrius Johnson should be above him. Maybe if you really want to reach, you can argue that, I don't know, Merab is above him because of the dominance or whatever. But like, seriously, man, as such a big Ilia Topuria fan, Ilia Topuria number 4. Honestly, dude, recent big wins should not be taken into account to this extent, because to me this feels almost like the best fighters of all time list. Because if 3 wins is all it takes to be considered the number 4 greatest fighter of all time, then I guess all these fighters before him, like Dan Henderson and all these dudes like Shogun with these long, Fedor Emelianenko with these long storied careers, I guess all of their wins mean fucking nothing then, because Ilia knocked out 3 very, very good fighters recently, very good fighters, and I don't discount those wins whatsoever. But to say that those 3 wins somehow surpasses or even puts him on the same level as someone like John Jones in his resume or GSP in his resume, I think that's crazy. I do. I think that's crazy. And GSP being where he is nuts, because there's no asterisk on GSP's resume. He has wins over some of the greatest welterweights of all time. He avenged all of his losses. And that fight against Johnny Hendricks, I'm sorry, was not a robbery. Even if it was a robbery, it would have been overturned because Hendricks tested positive. So for me, GSP, that dominant run, double champion, all that shit, to rank him at number 6 is pretty nuts. And I would honestly say a bit disrespectful, especially because of Ilia Topuria, man. He's still so new here, like at the top level. Like I said, 3 good wins. Even putting him above Merab is crazy. I think if you're going to rank Merab in the top 5, then he should be the one in Ilia's spot. And I would say at best maybe Ilia top 15 if you weigh up those 3 wins this much. But he just needs to do more. It shouldn't be this easy to crack the top 5 greatest fighters of all time, because that, in my opinion, discounts some of the greats of the past. But those are my gripes. I just want to come in here and yap. Just yap and debate with myself, debate with an imaginary Lucas Tracy about this particular list. But like, this is in no way me trying to hate on Lucas Tracy. I think what he did here, I mean, it was a pretty ballsy upload, man, because of course he was going to catch flack for this. He was always going to get shit for this. And I understand and I appreciate what he's been trying to do here. I do, because he's always been the front runner of these guys trying to push new fighters as the GOATs. Like, this guy's a new GOAT, this guy's a new GOAT. There's a new GOAT list after every big pay-per-view. But we got to pump the brakes a little bit. Got to pump the brakes a little bit on certain fighters. Like Ilia Topuria, he's getting there for sure. But top 5 GOATs, God no. God no. Right? GSP being as low as number 6, that is nuts, man. That's nuts. I would recommend everyone go back, look at GSP's resume, look at his long win streak, and you tell me that this man isn't the greatest fighter of all time. I don't know. To me, Islam, Topuria, Merab, even John Jones, right? None of these guys, even Volk, right? Volk, I actually think, of all of these fighters here, of all of these new age fighters, not that Volk is new age, right? He's 36 years old, but he is part of this just past generation of fighters. He has the strongest case for surpassing GSP out of all of them when it comes to best and greatest, right? Because he's clearly one of the best fighters of all time and one of the greatest, right? Winning the belt back once again, 2-time champion. And he's only lost to the best of the best. He really has, Volk. He has. So I think he has a really strong argument. But Ilia Topuria, dude, being that high already, come on. I think it's too much. I think it's a bit too much, and it kind of discounts what it takes to be a GOAT of the sport. I get it, we're eager to have like the new greatest guy to hype up, but it really does take away from the GOAT debate when we're ranking guys like Ilia Topuria up there that highly after 3 big wins. Like, come on, guys, come on. And I'm not saying those weren't prime wins either. I still think those are fantastic wins, and I give Ilia all the credit in the world. Like I said, I think he's the most dangerous fighter in the world. I think he's the best fighter in the world. But greatness is a different conversation altogether. But that does conclude my thoughts on Lucas Tracy's GOAT list. Let me know in the comment section what you think about his list, what you think about my thoughts about his list. Really, any of your thoughts whatsoever, let me know in the comment section. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.